Thank you, Tia, and good morning, everyone. And a big thanks also to Leonard. Leonard Sachs, like always, hiding in the back and not daring to opening officially the conference. But I'm more than glad that we all can be here and that you and your team organized this so wonderfully again. This morning, we will talk about Europe and the future of healthcare. And for that, the team has put together a wonderful panel with great experts. And I'm more than happy to co-chair that together with Tanja Dowe from Angelini Ventures. Tanja, why don't you start introducing yourself?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Guten Morgen miteinander, which is pretty much my extent for Schweizerdeutsch. Yes, I'm Tanja Dowe. I'm a managing director at Angelini Ventures. We're an investment fund investing in biotech and health tech. I look after the health tech investments, and we invest typically about 5 to 10 million per investment round in digital health, medical devices, and hybrid care models.
Thank you.
I'm based in Switzerland as well.
Thank you, Tanja. I'm pretty new with Siemens as a senior director there for digital affairs. I'm responsible for industry development, looking into basically hospitals, what they need in order to digitalize. Before I joined Siemens, I was one of the founding directors of EIT Health, also sponsoring one of the sponsors of the Sachs Forum editions, and therefore I'm more than happy to be back. With me on that panel, we have Ali Tinazli, the CEO of Lifespin, then Aerts, the head of the Novartis Foundation, and we will hear a keynote from her later, Eric de la Fortelle, managing partner at Cathay Health, Richard Carter, CTO of Proximie, Limited, and Solange Romagnoli, Senior Director at Roche Diagnostics. It would be great if you could not just introduce yourself with a few sentences and your background, but also tell us what you think is the strength and the weaknesses that we currently have in Europe in that field of healthcare. Let's start with you, Ali.
Hello, good morning, everybody. Actually, I enjoy the SACS conference. Actually, to me, one of the constituents of the European healthcare landscape to have such a great event. Just to say this at the very beginning, I like to attend this event. So my background is PhD biophysics. I'm German-American. I used to build new businesses at Sony, led HP's global healthcare strategy in Palo Alto, and then moved back to Germany, joined Lifespin as CEO. And what do we do at Lifespin? We are digitizing blood. Once the blood sample is digitized, we can interrogate the sample with our AI engine, resulting then into use cases in the field of preventive care, early disease diagnosis, and treatment monitoring. Now, people like to nitpick about Europe, it's so difficult, and especially about Germany, but actually, I think the fragmentation of Europe has some advantages because you can work on different MVPs, you can play different type of market scenarios. For example, Southern European countries are a bit different than the DACH region, a bit different than the Scandinavian. That's why, for me personally, we are now actually in the process of launching our first products in the European Union. And we have different go-to-markets for that, serving different countries. And here I see more the perceived curse is more blessing because we can try different things differently in different countries. So that's my perspective. And in terms of weaknesses, well, we always like to have more money all the time, right? I think when you compare to the US funds, I used to live most of my career in the US, right? You need to think in different terms in Europe. On the other hand, it's also more capital efficient in Europe. So I think the weakness, what is the biggest weakness perhaps, could be in the field of AI, regulation, because we rely very much on software, on AI-based, let's say, capabilities in our software here. We get all the time great insights from our lawyers, but then again, it's just important, I think, to have more planability when it comes to the AI Act. I think that's very important because it's not only about ISO or, let's say, CE-IVDR for the health tech of our health tech engine is the software. It's also important to understand the implications when it comes to the AI Act. And sometimes the wait times are just painfully long because you want to plan as much as ahead as you can, right? And this is not really possible. So we are in a limbo. But again, we have to take it as it comes. So just being pragmatic.
Thank you. Ann.
Yes, good morning, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here in my hometown, Basel. I'm Aerts, and I am heading the Novartis Foundation, where we are really passionate about how we can use data and technology to improve population health, but also narrow health inequities. And that's what we do around the world. My background is I'm a medical doctor specialized in population health, emergency care, and tropical medicine. So what are the strengths and weaknesses in Europe? In health, I would say our immense strength is the quality of the care you can access here in Europe. It's incredible. We have the best systems, I think, around the world. You can consider Europe a kind of an island of good quality care. The weakness is that it's reactive. It waits for people to come, to be sick, to come and present themselves, instead of becoming proactive and looking for people who don't have the symptoms or the problems yet before they experience acute problems. So we can use the fact of living in a data and digital-driven era. We should use that opportunity to shift and transform these health systems from being reactive, passive care systems to becoming proactive, predictive, which we can do now with all the predictive analytics, and ultimately preventive, so that they can keep populations healthy. That's how I would love to see Europe evolve in the next few years.
Thank you so much, Ann. Eric, people have met you in different roles. Please let us know what your current role is.
Yes, hello. Thank you for having me on the panel. Just a bit of background. I'm a scientist by training, did 10 years of scientific research, and then 15 years of business development in pharma and biotech, including 6 at Roche Pharmaceuticals. And then did about 11 years of venture capital investing. My last job in venture capital, where I still am, is in Cathay Health, which is a fund that really focused on this interface between high technology and healthcare. An interface is difficult because most people don't understand the other side. I can talk about that later. In addition to this role, because the fund has more or less finished investing, we have very few investment left in the fund. We're taking care of what we did before. I took another role here in Basel at an institute called IOB that spun off the company Rigaze, that is founded by Novartis, among others, and other Basel institutions. And my role there is to help them spin off more companies like Rigaze. Now, strengths and weaknesses. I think that the big strength of Europe is its capacity to innovate. Why is Europe so innovative? I think because it's fragmented. Case in point is Basel. There's this little city in the little canton, a little country that has, a substantial fraction of the worldwide pharma market capitalization. How does that happen? Well, it happens because it's on the border with Germany, it's on the border with France. It attracts talent from the whole of Europe and maybe from the US as well. And that ability to be sitting on borders is an image of Europe. Europe is innovative because it's sitting on many borders. And that makes us very strong in that field. The weakness goes with it is all our companies end up in American hands, more or less, in health tech. That's a problem. Why? Because the market is, of course, a lot better in the US. Let's see if that's still true next year. But also because our wonderful European bureaucrats, I'm not being ironic, they really have an important job. They tend to overdo their job, be overprotective, maybe listen to industry a little less than they should, and therefore make it a bit too difficult to bring things to market efficiently in Europe. So all the medtech companies in my portfolio, they're dreaming of just one thing: first product introduction in the US. And that needs to change, because otherwise we lose all our innovation to the US market and to the US corporate buyer.
Thank you so much, Eric. Richard.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Pleasure to be here this morning. I'm Richard Carter. I'm the Chief Technology Officer of Proximie, and Proximie, its mission is to digitize the OR. So what we do is bring real-time data handling, particularly with computer vision, to help ORs and procedural medicine contexts understand where they are in their workflow and it's also an infrastructure you can use to deploy clinical AI if you wish. My background, if you go back far enough, I actually trained as a trial attorney in the UK, so I'm a qualified barrister. It turned out I was a much better software engineer than I was lawyer. So I spent around about 20 years or so in capital markets working for large investment banks. And it was a great background for starting to look at some of the issues in health today. And I think this turns on or comes to some of the strengths and weaknesses in the EU. So rather than strength, I think certainly an opportunity is that demand is unquestionably rising very fast, and fixed capital, facilities and human labor is not keeping pace. So the only way that you can get more people treated effectively is through using technology to drive efficiency. And in Europe, particularly in the context, as we heard earlier, of the high quality healthcare, I think one of the advantages is that that creates a real expectation of quality and sets the ambition quite high. I think we've also touched on the sort of fragmentation of Europe, so I won't dwell on that. And I do think one of the contexts that's worth thinking about is that we have principles-based regulation that broadly is understood now in GDPR around data handling, but we don't yet understand how that applies to products, in particular with respect to AI, where a lot of the regulation may be at the wrong level of abstraction. We don't tend to regulate databases or spreadsheets, we tend to regulate the products that use them. So particularly as we start to look at some of the more advancing technologies, that fragmentation and that technology-focused approach rather than product-focused approach may introduce limitations later. So yeah, I think that's probably where I'll stop for now.
Thank you, Richard. Solange.
Yes, thank you so much for inviting me, and happy to be here, and good morning to everybody. So I have the luxury to pick up some of the items that my colleagues and panelists here have highlighted. I'm part of the Chief Technology Office in Roche Diagnostics. Is embedded into the global strategy and partnering in Roche Diagnostics. We are looking at the roadmap of technologies and biomarkers as well as digital solution in terms of partnering proposal coming from external companies. And we do also some proactive scouting in these fields and landscaping, which are the next technologies that we would be interested to have in our Roche portfolio. I'm a scientist by training, actually, I'm an MD and pathologist, and I had a previous life in academia and hospital as well, in the healthcare system. So going back to the topics of strength and weaknesses, I would say fragmentation is certainly a topic. Also from the regulatory perspective and the market reimbursement as well. I think that from the strength perspective, certainly the healthcare system to the point of Anne is a beautiful reality in Europe. And in terms of the quantity and quality of investment that are happening in Europe versus US, for example, I think that the balance is a little bit unbalanced in the two realities. On the other side, well, I think that the entrepreneurial mindset in US is a little bit of a strength versus the European perspective. It's a little bit more accentuated in that culture rather than in Europe. And I stop here, and we can see what is the next step for us.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for the introduction round. This was interesting. Anne and Richard talking about high quality of care. Eric, you mentioned capacity to innovate in Europe. Both Solange and Ali talked a little bit about lack of capital. I can't help but give a little comment on the investor perspective. Yes, US dominates in numbers for sure in venture deal counts and dollars. But according to our research, Europe is more capital efficient in getting products to market. So from an investor perspective, that also means that the valuations remain reasonable as well as the investment amounts. So for us, this is a wonderful market. And I think that some of our US colleagues also are seeing that, and we should really play for that benefit. And it's not so much about, we can of course say that it's because we just don't have capital, but we can also say that we're more efficient here in Europe. But maybe shifting gears then to the next question. MedTech covers a large, and health tech covers a large spectrum of products and solutions, from therapeutic solutions and devices to maybe remote patient monitoring. So there's a huge variety. We're not talking about just one product class. I want to ask the panelists on, how do you see those healthcare categories that succeed best in global competition? What are those technologies? And maybe we'll start from the other end. So Solange, what are the technologies that really succeed in competition?
Well, those that bring value to the healthcare system and those that help physicians and the lab managers to manage, I see the perspective of Roche Diagnostics, of course, in their daily life. And those that are actionable, so that there is a different treatment for patient, a different way to monitor patient. So all those, applications that help a physician to manage properly patient, to have an insight on what is coming next, whether there is a successful treatment, whether there is also in the field of prevention, whether there is a patient that is going into a disease, what modifies the course of that disease. All these items that come along the patient journey are extremely important. So the actionability of all the tools that we are providing to physicians and lab managers is important. On the other hand, there is the efficiency of the labs and the orchestration of the healthcare system, which is extremely important in terms of resources allocation in the healthcare system, in terms of saving money and saving time. So on these two basic pillars, how to treat properly patient and what is actionable in terms of patient benefit, and the other side is efficiency of the orchestration of the healthcare system as well. This is the way I can simplify a little bit. But then, to your point, Tanja, we can go and analyze which are the different pillars that we can put in place in order to have this efficiency on one side and a better outcome for patient on the other side.
And over to Richard, how do you see from your perspective, the competition, and what are the technologies that succeed best?
So from a personal perspective, we're most interested in efficiency as a company. So doctors, certainly in tertiary care, so if you're in a hospital, they spend around about 30% of their time on administration. So that's 30%, almost a third of their time is not seeing patients. And I think there's some trends that are emerging. The first is, I think, consumer tolerance of paper-based administration system is reducing very, very fast. People just won't stand for inefficiency where they feel that it is costing them money out of their own pocket, whether directly through payments they're making or indirectly through socially funded healthcare systems. So there's two opportunities. The first is to very directly reduce that time on administration. So anything that we can do that automates or simplifies that workflow, where a lot of that information is actually duplicated, will be, I think, quite successful. But there's a sort of indirect opportunity there, which I think is often overlooked, which is the use of newer technologies to integrate older technologies. So if you are in a hospital, replacing your electronic health record system is going to cost you tens of millions of euros, if not hundreds, and it's going to take you years. The opportunities to integrate systems more effectively without having to change them so that we get that much more kind of end user facing productivity is huge, and I think it's often overlooked. And I think inevitably that will influence outcomes, because where people are seen more promptly, where they're seen earlier, where we can better track outcomes through longitudinal studies, I think we're going to see a much faster rate of innovation in response to that. So for me, I think the changes in productivity and the improvements in efficiency will stimulate the sort of innovation environment that Eric mentioned even further, and I think it becomes a flywheel for future success.
Great. So the integration, the end user perspective and outcomes. Also, I guess we've been talking for a couple of years about this, moving from point solutions to more integrated and holistic solutions. Eric, you've crossed over from pharma and biotech side more to the health tech side in your recent journey. Translational medicine and innovation is maybe how I would categorize, the place where the space where you play a lot. Which technologies in that category? What are those new trends that really play well in that market?
So translation is a really difficult word. We're all lost in it. Apart from the cheap shot, it's really true that the word has a different meaning for many different people or tribes. As Tanja was mentioning, in the drug discovery, it's well understood to be translating from animal to human, for instance. But it could mean translating from the lab dish to an animal experiment. That's also translation. For some people in pharma, it's really translating from phase 2 to the market. So give it the meaning you want. In medtech, I would give it, again, a different meaning. Translation is because you go quickly to market, at least faster than pharma to market in health tech and medtech, it is translating an idea, a technology into a marketable product. And we were discussing this. What's the need? What need should we aim for? And both as a company builder and as an investor, we need results quickly. I mean, especially in this funding landscape, if you don't get sales to pick up really quickly, then you're probably toast. So you need to define your need, not only to be a real need, or a need for integration, or a need for this and that. All these things take place over more or less long timelines. If you want to change the culture of the hospital, if you want to integrate things, it takes a lot of work. As an investor, and with a view of short timelines, very quick return on investment, I tend to privilege business models where there is a crying need. I mean, a need where the doctor or whoever, the professional, is on their knees with a noose around their neck, and they're saying, please, please, please help, I can't take it anymore. And that, to me, is a good need to invest in VC, because if the product fits the description, then people are more likely to pick it up quickly, and the sales will come up quickly, and we'll get our returns, et cetera, et cetera. That doesn't mean it's the only way to do investment, but that's what VC is for. VC is to make money relatively quickly. There could be other sources of financing, bank financing, European financing, et cetera, that is more patient and can fit with timelines that are probably more worthwhile in changing systems, changing cultures, but that's not for VC, I would argue. We're not working this way. So translation, what does it mean? I would say in our field, translate to market, have a success in the market from your initial technology idea.
Thank you, Eric. And let's continue the discussion about the medical need. And I'd like to share a quick story before I hand over to Anne. It was my first week at Siemens, where I was invited on the opening panel of the British Science Festival in London. And in this opening panel, there was the president of the University of UEL, Amanda Broderick, a wonderful, wonderful leader, and Kevin Fenton, who is part of the administration in London, who is responsible for public health. And I thought I would sit on the panel and talk about the Siemens technology that we use to make the hospital autonomous and optimize logistics and patient outcome and digitize everything and address the lack of qualified employees and people. And then Kevin basically said, hey, our problem, especially at the location of East London, is that people don't go to a hospital. People actually don't benefit from medical support. They actually stay at home and suffer from their disease because they are neither aware nor are they paid if they really would need the right treatment. So what we need to develop is a digital approach to really get into their homes, to really address their needs and make them aware. And that was a really, I wouldn't call it life-changing, but super important panel discussion for me. And I'm more than happy that you are focusing exactly on that topic, on how we can provide latest technologies, great products, but serving a really basic need in a population that is totally underserved. So therefore, really, really looking forward to get your answer on the healthcare technology categories that succeed in the global competition, but serve and benefit the weakest and poorest parts of our society.
Thank you. I wasn't expecting that question. In fact, I missed, but it's a real good one. It's so true that we need to get to people where they are. We don't have to expect that they all come to the hospital or have time enough to wait to get their blood pressure measured in the hospital and pass half a day of their work there. It's impossible. So you need to get to people where they are. That's what we did, for example, in one of our urban initiatives in Brazil, in Sao Paulo, a city of 16 million people. We installed a digital screening corner in every health facility so that people who would pass there, regardless the reason, could have their blood pressure measured, their diabetes checked, or their cholesterol measured, and with that immediately be transferred to the consultation if they were screened positive. So that was already lowering the threshold to get access to diagnosis. But then we saw it's mainly the women we detect, because only women come to the health facilities with their children or as caregivers. You miss the man, and you miss the young man specifically. So then we went to football stadia, samba clubs, or subway stations, where you then install opportunities for people to get their cardiovascular risks measured so that you get that traction where they are. But obviously here in Europe, with all the digital access we have, we can do this in your phone. You can self-screen, you can offer any type of virtual consultation to people who don't want to come to the health system. And we've seen how during COVID, to get back to that for once, this was life-saving. Virtual health and care was a transformation we saw in 1 year that was usually gonna take 15 years probably, from normal care to virtual care. But definitely, I think in population health, what is the problem is that the decision makers are making decisions based on opinions still. It's not evidence-based decision-making such as we see in high quality of care where you have evidence-based medicine. We don't have that in public health. And people in decision-making positions are asking us to support them to shift that towards data-driven decision-making. And for that, we now have the option to build tools like simulators where they can simulate, if I invest my 3 million in this intervention, that's gonna be my health impact on the population level, or that's gonna be the cost. If I don't do that, this will be my impact. Or if I invest in another intervention, what is going to be the health outcome? So we need to support decision makers with tools that use predictive analytics, and that is what we have to really start accelerating this also in Europe, because there's too much data around not to be used, and it's impossible for a decision maker who's a public health authority to understand all that data. So we have to make it usable to them and help them make evidence-based decisions. But if I may just end with, I love these interventions of my predecessors here in health tech that we have introduced throughout all our initiatives around the world. We've seen that there's 3 success factors, and I was so happy to hear it's exactly the same as what you say for getting them scaled, is that the design has been human-centered. You have to take the end user feedback into account. We all know, but it's rarely done. The design has to take into account how you integrate it in the workflow processes before you start designing. Otherwise, it won't get integrated. And it has to reduce the workload
for the providers, plus improve the quality of the care they can deliver, so improve the outcomes. And we've seen that massively with AI-driven diagnosis, that image-based diagnosis, how it can be faster, more accurate in any type of images, if it's radiology, pathology, dermatology. We even developed an AI-driven diagnosis for a skin lesion for detecting leprosy. The last elimination passes for leprosy elimination can be done by AI now. Something we've never had a diagnostic test for 3,000 years. So we have to take advantage of living in this time now to build these tools and make them scaled so that the people who really need it get access to them.
Thank you so much, Anne. AI-driven diagnostics, that's a perfect bridge actually to Ali that you have built. And let me ask, how is precision medicine in your focus?
Yeah. Actually, I'm seeing many great elements converging. What you mentioned, Kurt, with the example of East London, what you mentioned, and on the importance of having it accessible. First of all, I think the need we can articulate is that we need better, more objective data about health status, what is health. And this is exactly which falls into the precision medicine, which started with genomics 20, 30 years ago. Now we have metabolomics, proteomics is getting established. Illumina acquired SomaLogic last summer, right? That's all great. So basically, we have now the suite of precision medicine tools pretty much complete. We at Lifespin, we are coming from the metabolomics side. And now, of course, we have now so rich data that you need to deal with those data. And here, of course, we have AI engines, which basically make things much more efficient. We look out for patterns, which are disease or health condition specific. So basically, this all helps also to make it more affordable. So what we have now in front of us is a suite of new cutting-edge, let's say, solutions. Some of them are even quite affordable. But then the question is how to reach the people. So how can I avoid that this becomes just an ultra luxury gadget for a few? And that's why we basically have, just to explain briefly what we do. So we take a blood sample, we capture with the magnetic physical method 250 metabolic biomarkers out of this blood sample, then we put it into our AI engine. So far, so good. Now, important is how to get the patient into the system. So how to bridge the first mile of any new technology. And now we have established actually beginning of this year a home collection kit. And we have sent it actually in a study in Germany to 300 households. And then they collected their blood. It's a self-collection cartridge. You put it on your arm. It's a CE marked off-the-shelf standard thing. Then they send it back to us. We added a stabilizer, which is good enough for 3 days at room temperature. So basically now we have a means, at least from our perspective, to make this really cutting-edge AI-based solution accessible up to people's homes. And this, I think, is quite important. At the same time, keeping a lookout on the cost. Our imperative is that the street price of any of those tests must be below 100 euros in order to get a meaningful traction. And that's basically what we are working on. And just to connect all those things, all those cutting-edge tools are relevant and they are all moving forward. The technology itself, to be honest, is rather straightforward to handle. It's not rocket science. It's really just a matter of engineering bandwidth and capacity, right, which we have in Europe, as we all agree. I think important is then how to make it packageable, available to people, and then ultimately to reimbursement systems. And this is, I think, the more interesting part. How can I show that it's really useful? And if I can reach more people with this, especially in this case of people who perhaps don't like to visit healthcare provider settings for whatever reason, could be just the high parking fee, who knows, right? But I think step one is, how can I make the user experience for patient just more convenient?
Lot of wisdom in this round. Ali, you talked about efficiency, availability. I translate that as accessibility. You talked about costs. If we think about the future healthcare markets and what are the technologies and business models we need for that? So I'm kind of bringing us to a bit higher level. back into the big problems of the world, the demographic changes, the aging population, shortage of care personnel, soaring healthcare costs. We're going to have to reorganize the way that we deliver health. What is it? What are the business models? What are the technologies? AI is going to save us, right? I'm going to not just I'm just going to call a couple of names here and there, but please also panelists just ask for, just pitch in and let's discuss this. So Ali, AI, is AI in general, is that what's going to help us in the future? That's going to help us organize, and how?
Well, AI is more like a tool, as you have it in your dishwasher, in your car, in your toothbrush. I think the question is more like, how do I make it, how do I use it, and how do I make it available? For example, you have many crazy ways how to use it, but I think, for example, in our first products, we actually use very little AI for regulatory reasons. Right? So basically, that we solve most of the problems with statistical analysis, then put on top some AI functionalities. Because important, first of all, is that the market is getting used to a new product category. Basically, the second generation of products we are working on, which will be telling if, for example, the cancer patient responds well or not to a given treatment, they're the more sophisticated AI tools, all going along with the higher liability. But for many obvious reasons, we have pushed this out and first do something which is more basic in the AI engine complexity. But I try not to, so I see AI more as a tool to make things cheaper, right? So basically compared to standard processes. So I try to harvest basically the beneficial outcomes of AI to be much more efficient and to ideally pass on the cost advantage to the market. For example, our capability of capturing 250 biomarkers and making related health statements, initially in preventive care, would cost in a legacy setting, in a standard lab, more than 1,000 euros. Our cost, it's way below 100 euros, so that we can make it available to our partners at around 100 euros street price. So basically, I see it really more in resulting in faster, better, cheaper products. Second generation, more sophisticated products. But I think what we need for this, obviously, is the planability from a legislation standpoint, so that it's being accepted to make it used. But then again, you can have the best, most sophisticated engine. If physicians don't accept it, or if patients cannot read it easily, then it's a problem. And that's why we are starting now in the German-speaking countries through a B2B2C partnership with direct-to-consumer models. And then ultimately, important is to listening to the physicians. We have now many, let's say, clinical guideline meetings with physicians in Europe and Asia to basically speak about the output. The data are straightforward. Important is how do I translate this into output which is useful for the physician in the instructions. So it's a translation job, but again, translation in different context again.
Can I chime in and maybe also ask the other panelists to provide an answer if possible? Last week I had a meeting with a doctor. He was very experienced, well-known. He worked previously in the hospital, then he went out to his own practice. And then after retirement, he went back to the hospital. And he told me, it was so confusing. He has been 20 years out of the hospital and he came back and there's like 20 different tools and dashboards and windows and things that all run independently. And it returned to a result where a patient was showing up and he tried to figure out some information about that patient from all the windows and displays and things that he had. And then he said, oh, it looks like you're new, right? And then the patient said, no, I had surgery last week and I need to have a control visit. That's something that should not happen. And of course, you could say that's the retired people who don't have to care and the new ones will be able to deal with like all the multiple interfaces. But isn't AI also a possibility to gather information and provide exactly the needed information at a certain point of time to the decision maker or to the patient or whoever needs to get the latest information, the most relevant information, and not have digging into different types of data? Richard?
Yeah, so ideally, yes, that's exactly what you would use AI for. And agentic AI or, put more simply, chatbot AI is a very good tool for taking information and summarizing it. The hesitation up to now has been that AI, whenever it encounters a gap in the information, tends to hallucinate and just basically make it up. But hallucination control is getting much, much better now. And I think we've got much more experience in how to persuade AIs not to hallucinate. So ideally, that kind of agentic AI that pulls the information from multiple systems and presents it in a single cohesive form would be very useful. I also think it touches on something else, which is, the question was, what are the business models that win? For me, it's actually very simple. It's whichever business model distributes fastest. So it's not necessarily about having the very best outcome or best result. It's about getting it used. And where that is used and provides an increment over what you get as a patient today, then I think the reality is patients just won't stand for it not being used. They will demand that it's used. And regulators have reputations too. And I think we've seen in other industries, particularly, for example, transport with Uber, when regulation gets in the way, but consumer demand is there, consumer demand will overwhelm regulation and regulation will catch up. So I think that the business model that I would advocate is just get it used. Right? Just get it used. And whatever you do to get it used, providing that outcome is securely ahead of the outcome that you have today, you'll probably win if you're first or a very, very good second.
Talking about regulation, I would say the European health data space is not a regulation that would limit us, but it's finally a regulation that provides a legal framework that allows us to really work with medical data. And that also puts the citizen in the center on the one hand with the primary use. So you have access to your data. Hospitals, doctors are obliged to hand out medical information or put it into your electronic health record. On the other hand, we can also use it in a secondary use model to train our algorithms to improve models. Do you think that the European health data space also provides enough space for new business models, or is it more important for existing business models? What's your perspective on that as we are in the European innovation panel? Richard or anyone else?
Why don't we hear another voice first?
Eric.
Well, since I spoke about regulation before, I'll try that. I think the problem is never in the intention of regulation. The intention is always good. Protect the people, it can't be bad. The problem is in the implementation. So if in order to protect people or to protect companies from doing stupid things, you have systems that are very cumbersome, require a lot of qualified this and that, a lot of paperwork, etc. At some point, you strangle innovation. So the question is how to achieve the very good goals of regulation with minimal hindrance to business. And this is where Europe is, a little bit behind Anglo-Saxon systems such as the US or maybe the UK, which really, and Switzerland, who have this culture of keeping things as simple as possible. Let's wish that Europe adopts this culture.
And our Siemens CEO always complains about the gold-plating mentality that we have, especially in Germany. Not sure about the other European countries, but especially in Germany, that is something that people love. Yeah, but further ideas about technology models. Solange.
Well, technology. I think we jumped into AI, but we didn't consider actually other tools that are in place that can help physicians to put the right diagnosis for patient and also to manage patients. So I'm referring to clinical decision support algorithms, which are based on wet biomarkers, but also on clinical data of patients, which actually help a lot in terms of prevention also, or identifying patient risk in oncology, in cardiovascular space, and in other areas like, for example, kidney disease. So we are quite active in that space. On top of that, there are also, monitoring patient. We mentioned that in terms of keeping control on how the patient is doing while they are at home and not necessarily hospitalizing them. So that reduces the cost on the healthcare system when the patient stays at home and is not necessarily reaching the hospital for that condition. Certainly, especially in Europe, we are an aging population and with chronic disease. So there is a very important and urgent need to keep this population under control and monitor them at home. So certainly all devices and all technologies that allow this kind of, monitoring are absolutely welcome. Now, on top of AI is useful, of course. It's extremely useful. I don't see the regulatory bodies as an entrance to business, but rather, regulating the use of it. And the business model, it goes back to the saving from the healthcare system and population health management. So we have to take that perspective as well. So all the technologies that certainly help in this effort they do have a future in the healthcare system. Actionability, saving, and efficiency, as well as guaranteeing the patient the best outcome for their disease.
Yeah, if I can build on that, this is really how we see it as well. AI can definitely transform our health systems because we need to do this. We don't have enough providers. We have a rising burden of chronic disease with the aging population, but also the rapid urbanization that leads to chronic disease in much younger generations all around the world. And then the emerging threats of new diseases. So AI has to be used there, or digital technology and AI can be used to transform these health systems and become much more proactive. I believe AI is the biggest promise is in population health, as you were saying, Solange, because it allows us now to truly understand what drives our health, what drives disparities in outcomes, and what drives these differences in life expectancies in one city, for example. In New York, a baby born in one zip code of the same day has a 12 years longer or shorter life expectancy than a baby born on the same day in another zip code. The same is true in London, everywhere. If you each stop of the tube, the subway, takes 2 years away of your life expectancy. So we have to challenge that reality, and that is what AI can do. We can now understand that, why this is the case, and then at least try to start addressing it. Or how we use it is use that information to target the interventions we know need to be done, the earlier detection, adequate management, that you can target to the people who need it most and reach these people who stay at home, who don't seek healthcare, who don't have access to healthcare. But the last thing, which I also heard here, is that in these new health systems, I believe it's all about the person, the individuals, to become the CEOs of their own health. We need to have our own data in our own hand and be accountable for that. Use it as much as possible to get the right answers to our health problems. We will have agents. Next year, I just heard from my friend in Microsoft, 1.5 billion agents are going to be released. We will have that in our pockets. We can become the CEO of our own health. This is the future of health systems outside of the brick and mortar of the health systems.
Wonderful. So the future is about kind of maybe blurring lines between the individual and what is the role of the healthcare, the individual, the consumer, the clinical side, also maybe preventive care, healthcare, sick care, and we need to rethink. We're coming to the end of our time here on the stage. I'd like to challenge all the panelists to summarize this conversation, what you think we are going to take home from this conversation in one word. If you only had one word, how would you describe this conversation, what we talked about? How would you describe the Europe and future of healthcare innovation. I'm going to call up. Everyone's thinking very hard. So let's go in order. Ali.
Healthcare economics answers all the questions.
Perfect. Anne.
Transformation.
Eric.
Think big in terms of the goal that you want to achieve with your technology.
Richard.
Demand, because it's not going away.
Great. And Solange.
Keep people healthy. That is our role, right?
That's wonderful. And Kurt, what do you think? What's your one word?
I would, summing up the conversation, I would say still the outcome orientation.
And I'll conclude with one word, which is hope.
Thank you so much.